All right, I've actually done some introductions. So, Andy, it's all yours now.
Great. Sorry, I was just making sure I was on internet because, like I said, I've literally just run in from the gym, but I should now be on my internet at home. So, look, first up, thanks for that kind introduction, and it's my honor to, to be with you tonight. I was very honored to meet Noah at Isaac actually at the recent session that we had just a few days ago, really, the Move conference, which I was really enjoyed doing. And he asked me, would I come on? I said, absolutely, as long as my media team are comfortable, and they were. So here we are. So yeah, you know a fair bit about my background, primarily mass transit, and most recently I was commissioner for Transport for London, a real troubled time really in TfL's history, same as every other transport agency, because when I went there, the Elizabeth line was nowhere near open. There were no customers. There was hardly any revenue. We really were in a dire strait. So it was a real nice rounding out of my transit career, having started at the Tube in 1989 to finish as the commissioner of TfL to get the Elizabeth line open, to rebuild the finances, to strike a deal with government, and to rebuild the morale of the organisation actually and the ridership. So I loved my time there, but my wife and I always wanted to come back to the States. And I had a number of options. I could have gone to another transit agency. I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to do something a bit different. And I also wanted to give back to the US because your wonderful country has given me a green card. And it just seemed to me that, I'm very grateful for that. It's a real honor to get a green card. So, what could be better in some ways than hopefully being a small part in effecting what I think can be an absolute rail renaissance in this country, and particularly high speed rail? So, when the chairman and the CEO reached out to me and said, hey, Andy, would you like to come and set up a high-speed rail program here at Amtrak and take carriage of several in-flight programs, very early days, but in-flight programs? I jumped at that opportunity. And also, what could be more American than Amtrak? It's Americana writ large, which I love. So it's been a busy, frantic 6 months so far. What have I been up to? Setting up the office. I mean, it's basically just me at the moment. I'm about to have another person join me from the MTA, actually, one of my old colleagues at New York City Transit. So I'm setting up the office primarily to be a point of triage, so that where there's all sorts of interest now, and interested groups such as yourselves who want things like these presentations, or who've got questions, or equally for us to be proactively finding out what's going on around the world in the space of high speed, then I'm the point of triage. So the effectively any new proposals come my way, and a lot of them make sense. You get the odd wacky one, like how about New York to LA? Well, that ain't happening anytime soon. That's a bit too far. But also to put together a high-speed strategy. So watch this space on that one. We'll have a strategy published hopefully before Christmas. But then also to take carriage of one project in particular, plus another that's a little further behind, and then several others still to come. But let me just talk about high speed as a concept, first of all. I'm sure many of you have experienced it. It's just the most, done properly, it's the most fantastic way to get around. And now I was living in London for a long time. Practically no one now flies between London and Paris. Why would you? You've got the Eurostar that whisks you from St. Pancras to the Gare du Nord, downtown to downtown, in absolute comfort, and in way less time actually than schlepping out to the airport, going through security, boarding, lining up on the runway. Yeah, fair enough. When you're in the air, you beat the train, but then you land and you've got to get in from the airport. So for me, over a certain distance, high speed wins every time. So what are the characteristics you need? You need to have two or more, but ideally, typically two pair cities. Sometimes you have intermediate stops, but cities at either end with viable population bases. So generally, you're looking at around 1 million people either end. That's not an absolute rule, but what it does mean, you need a good catchment area in order to have that viable footfall to make the service pay for itself, and get that business case going. You want the distance between to be between 200, 400, maybe 600 miles apart, in order that it's probably too long to drive, but too short to fly. So I normally say 200 to 400, but certainly when you look at some of the newer lines now, they're going up to 600 miles. You want relatively straightforward topography. Obviously, building the thing it's expensive, and the more straightforward the topography, the better. You want to be able to build pretty much in a straight line. It's not that's not absolute. You can have curves, but in order for the train to navigate the curves, you're looking for fairly shallow curves. So no tight turns, because otherwise you would end up with speed restrictions. You don't want to have interlining, so you want to have the line dedicated to high speed. Ideally, that's not, again, absolute. Some of the German ICE trains do interwork with other express trains, but ideally it's a dedicated high speed route where only high speed trains operate. Certainly no stoppers, certainly no freight trains. Fully enclosed, so good line side fencing, state of the art ballast, state of the art catenary, state of the art signaling, moving block signaling to allow you to move trains safely closer together. So there's a number of prerequisites, and those are the physical ones. Now, obviously, what you've also got to have is lots of money, about $40 million, we always say, a mile, and lots of political will. And in many ways, getting the money and the political will sometimes is harder than actually doing the construction, because, you know, these things are always contentious. And one of the questions I often get asked is, well, why doesn't the US have any high-speed rail? Well, I think partly it's because there's a very strong aviation lobby in this country. There's certainly a very strong automobile lobby, but also people are spooked by the sticker shock, the price of the construction, because that doesn't come cheap, because it's state of the art. It has to be of a certain standard in order to accommodate very, very high-speed trains. But my argument is, well, okay, I get it, that can be shocking when you first see the price, and yet people don't balk at that kind of price and way more to extend and widen interstates or to build new rail airport terminals. Why is it that rail is treated differently? That's a question I've yet to solve. But I think another reason why the US sticks out as not having high speed, in addition to that strong aviation and automobile lobby, is I really do think sometimes it's genuine lack of understanding about what high speed really is. Because if you haven't been on true high speed, you may have this view that it's a train that gets a move on. It's a bit faster than your average train. But they've still got this slightly jaundiced view of what it might be, that it's kind of an old-fashioned technology. So, you know, I think until we actually get a true high-speed line up and running in the US, people will still have that skepticism, shall we say. But the corollary is that I think once we successfully get a true high-speed operation in place in the US, it will be a domino effect. Other cities, other governors, other mayors will clamor for it. So it's interesting you saying about Chicago to Milwaukee. I could think of many compelling city pairings where, you know, you tick those boxes, you look at the distance in between, you look at the potential ridership with the population, you look at the potential to shift people from one mode to another. And I think that it really would be a domino effect when people see what good really looks like. And there's plenty of evidence of that, what good looks like. If you look around the world, we have Japan set us on this path, 1964, the fabulous bullet train, the legendary Shinkansen. France had the TGV back in the late 70s. And certainly for France, people said it will be a white elephant. It will never pay its way. People won't stop flying between Paris and Lyon. Well, they were proven wrong, to the extent that now not only is high speed making its way across the whole of France, there's a lot of high speed routes now. French government policy has now been changed to make it impossible. You're not able to fly for journeys of 2.5 hours or less. You've got to, if a train exists and your flight is 2.5 hours or less, you have to take the train. There is no domestic flight. So you look again around the world. So from that initial start of the vanguards, really, Japan and France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Korea, Taiwan, China now has the biggest, from a standing start, only a few years ago, the biggest high-speed network in the world. The UK with high speed 1, Morocco, Russia. The US really does stand out. And again, I do think it's because perhaps people have just never experienced that convenience, that exhilaration, and that time saving of going downtown to downtown. And that's what really makes the difference. You end up where you're supposed to end up, which is in town, not on the periphery somewhere. So I do think the time is right. I think we have a number of things going in our favor, increasing dissatisfaction with existing modes, people getting fed up with being stuck in traffic jams on interstates, held up at airports for myriad reasons, increasing concerns about the environment and about environmental concerns, which lends itself to an electrified railway system, definitely. And plus, we have an administration that is very pro railroads. Amtrak Joe, people saying that they want to make this a reality. The secretary, Pete Buttigieg, just came back from a trip to Japan, and he was given a ride, including access to the train cab. He sat on the front of the Shinkansen. He came back gushing about it. He thought it was fantastic. Plus, you've also got money. We actually have a reasonable amount of money available. The IIJA, the Infrastructure Act, the Bipartisan Act, and there's potentially billions, literally $44 billion available not only for corridor upgrades but also for high speed as a concept. So, and where does Amtrak sit in all of this? Well, we don't see it as a panacea for everything. It's not right for every route, but we definitely see high speed as part of that overall transportation puzzle. And again, good high speed doesn't just terminate in isolation. It should have great connections with regional trains, with transit, with mass transit, with buses, with last mile transport options. And I would again cite St. Pancras as a good example. When you come in on the Eurostar into St. Pancras station, you've got King's Cross and St. Pancras main line right there upon you in order to continue your journey on conventional rail. You've got the tube downstairs, you've got the buses on the Euston Road, you've got cabs, you've got Uber, you've got bikes. And, it really is the overground, it really is a good example of how high speed truly should be. So we see it as very much part of the puzzle, but we definitely are interested in developing it as a concept. So let's talk specifics then. What's the project that I've been working on the most? And again, I do stress it's not the only one. We're looking at a number of corridors, but one that absolutely ticks all the boxes. You think about the city pairings, Dallas to Houston, two of the top 5 fastest growing municipalities in the US. It's actually number 4 and number 5. So you're talking big centers of population, a suboptimal, somewhat dangerous, I would argue. When you look at the accident stats, interstate, the I-45, I've ridden it. I went on the bus from Dallas to Houston. It's a very comfortable bus, but it took forever. The traffic was terrible. And there's 20 years of construction slated to make that road wider. Do we really want to be doing that in 2023? Obviously, you've got flights, you've got the 2 airports in Dallas, you've got the 2 airports in Houston. But again, is that really the right option over such a short distance? Or could those runway slots and those gate slots be opened up for the airlines and the airports to run much more lucrative long haul, which makes more sense? So it really does tick all of the boxes. And the business case that we've looked at so far really does look compelling. What makes this a really exciting prospect is the distance is 240 miles. We would be using, yet to be absolutely confirmed, but the assumption is we would, as long as we can get past, legitimately get a waiver for Build America, the Build America process, we would be looking to use the, again, legendary Shinkansen technology, N700 Shinkansen sets, which would do the journey in under 90 minutes. And given that there's only one intermediate stop planned, which is at College, where there's a big university about halfway, that would actually be the fastest average train service in the world. Not the top speed, there are faster trains, but the fastest average train service in the world. And that's certainly something that where there's critics and there's supporters in Texas. The supporters love that. The critics, I don't mind saying, often ask me to repeat that stat: the fastest average train service in the world. So that kind of whets people's appetites. You know, Texans rightly very proud of their state. Everything's twice as big in Texas. Well, you could have the most prestigious train service in the world connecting your two of your key cities. That's not the only thing Amtrak's interested in Texas. We have got corridor ID applications in to look at the rest of the triangle. So Dallas to San Antonio and Austin, and San Antonio across to Houston. So we see it as part of that jigsaw. Where are we with the project? We're in the planning phase. There was already a project looking at this, but they asked Amtrak to come in to look and undertake a due diligence exercise to see particularly if after COVID, there's still a business case. We believe that there is. In fact, the potential ridership is as strong as ever, but the mix of ridership has somewhat changed. Fewer business riders, more leisure riders. So we definitely think that there's merit. It will all revolve around whether or not we're successful in the upcoming grant applications, the federal state grant applications. But I'm pretty confident we won't go away empty-handed. It's not the only show in town. There's a number of other routes that we're considering. And we're not the only players in this space. Obviously, you've got high-speed rail in California coming along, Bakersfield to Mercado. And then Brightline has still got a plan to build in the desert. That's Las Vegas to LA, maybe in time for the Olympics. And so it's the start of a revolution, everyone. I really do think if we can make this a goer, and if we can show what high speed is capable of, and we can get through the hard yards of property acquisition and raising the billions that are needed, if one day we actually have this service up and running and people experience the speed, the safety record, and the super reliability of Shinkansen, I think people are going to clamor for more. Not necessarily just on that type of train. There's Siemens products, there's Alstom products. You watch, though. That's my prediction. Get one up and running properly. Next thing you know, Mark, you might even have your Milwaukee to Chicago route. You never know. That looks like a good corridor to me. So maybe I'll leave it there. And I've seen there's some questions coming up in the chat. It would be helpful if someone called out the questions, and I'll be happy to give my views.
Andy, I'll take care of that.
Sure.
But I did want to point out, I'm not sure if Isaac mentioned something, but on the call today, we have about 6 experts in the Shinkansen.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, it's something UW-Madison. It's for over 20 years, we've had a relationship with Central Japan Railways, where they've sent interns over to Japan in order to see every aspect of the Shinkansen and the operation. In fact, I was an intern. Oh, it's absolutely incredible. Stephen, myself, we were in 2018. We got Karsh, we got several different people. So we totally understand when you talk about the experience of riding the Shinkansen.
Oh, it's fantastic. I remember doing one journey from Hakodate back to Tokyo, and we did it in Gran class, actually, which is above even green class. And it was just superb. And you know what? That's a long old distance. That's 513 miles. So it's about 1,000-mile round trip. We, in both journeys combined, we were only 20 seconds late. It was amazing.
Absolutely. That was. Did you have a chance to ride the SC Maglev? No.
That's something I should do one day.
Okay. All right. Incredible technology. So, all right, let me ask a few of the questions if they've come in. So, from Stephen, what are your priorities as you get comfortable with your new position at Amtrak?
Okay, that's a very good question. Number one would be to put together. To me, things are slightly back to front at the moment. Because there was a program that was already being looked at, albeit very early days. We're doing that in advance of actually having an Amtrak written strategy for high speed. So certainly a priority of mine is to publish, to put together, then publish to my exec team and my board to have approved an Amtrak strategy which we can then use as a briefing document for all sorts of audiences, but can also be our roadmap and guidance document as to what how we evaluate and hopefully develop other high speed corridors in the future. So definitely put together that strategy, progressively build a team, go around and make the case for high speed at different conferences, speaking to elected officials, speaking to media. I see that as a priority. And then hopefully I will actually be building a team, because there'll come a point where I can't, do all of this on my own. Because success for me would be that we're run ragged in the amount of lines that we're looking at. And, that's a priority. That, again, is a priority for me. And I guess the last one would be to try to make the case compelling enough that even a change in administration wouldn't see us just grind to a halt. I'm hoping that we'll get bipartisan support for what, to me, is a bit of a no-brainer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we have a question from the room in Madison.
Yeah.
Andy, are you focused on building totally new infrastructure or working with freight companies to upgrade existing infrastructure?
Well, certainly for high speed, as I mentioned earlier, you really don't want to be interlining with freight trains. You just couldn't do that. And also the infrastructure for a high speed train is quite different to that of a very, very heavy, very long freight train. But if we're not talking so much about just high speed, but part of that overall jigsaw that I talked about earlier, definitely we are looking to upgrade existing lines. I'll give you a classic example. Is the Lincoln service between Chicago and St. Louis. That's just been upgraded from 90 to 110 miles per hour. We're looking to improve service where we already have it, to reinstate it where we used to have it, and to add it in some cases where we've never had it. So that does require also working with freight companies. Another good example of where we are working with a freight company is to reinstate the railroad between Mobile and New Orleans, the Gulf service, which is going to happen in the not too distant future.
All right. Well, thank you to the room there. This question comes from Johnny. With various projects employing public-private or public-private partnerships, how does Amtrak's plans for the future incorporate essentially private investment in high-speed rail, or should it be specifically public?
I think we're open-minded on that. I mean, remember what I said earlier, you need to have big amounts of money. So I think probably it's unrealistic to expect all of a high-speed route to be completely covered by grant. And certainly Amtrak's just existing revenue can't be assigned to that, because job one in any railroad, any transit company, is maintain state of good repair on the existing network before you even consider extensions or new technologies. So I think there would be some combination of private and public funding, and that's certainly generally typical of the way high speed has been financed around the world. Not exclusively, different jurisdictions do things differently. China has gone down a different path and has had this massive expansion in high speed from nothing to 22,000 miles, I think it is. And that's a different model and largely being central government funded. But I think the jury's out. Let's wait and see. Each case is different. Each project's different. But certainly we're open-minded as to how the funding comes from. All I know is you need a lot of money.
That's the name of the game. Where does the money come from?
Yeah.
So
as ever,
along that lines, there's several different questions going on in the chat, so I'm going to try to put it all together. But one of the issues here in the United States is the environmental review process, and then even lawsuits regarding eminent domain, specifically with Texas Central. As America becomes more excited about high-speed rail, do you think those barriers that so many projects have experienced today will become easier to achieve?
Well, I'd hope so. I think, with Texas, some land acquisition has already happened. There is still more property or more land to acquire. And let me just make a general comment. Certainly, if Amtrak takes this project forward, use of eminent domain, which has been allowed for by the Supreme Court of Texas, would be the absolute last resort. You don't default to that. You really try to avoid that if at all possible. I always try and put myself in the position of the person whose property it is. I wouldn't like it if I was just told straight from the get-go, you've got to sell your property. You'd certainly expect a lot of steps to happen before that. I think going forward, if some of the myths of high speed can be demolished, and what do I mean by myths? Things like, it's this massive swathe of land that gets taken and creates a huge wall across states or counties. Well, that's actually not quite true. For starters, the land take for a high-speed route with 2 tracks, typically even with 4, is less than an interstate. And it need not be a huge impenetrable barrier. It depends how the line is built. If it's built, for example, on viaduct, then there's obviously a way still to move goods, animals, vehicles underneath the viaduct or through the viaduct. So I think I don't underestimate the challenge, but I think progressively, here's the real opportunity. Progressively, as governments, states, elected officials, taxpayers, Americans see the benefit, not only that the high-speed line can bring in terms of reduced journey time, safety, reliability. Even if you're a diehard car user, suddenly we've taken 12,000 cars a day off the I-45. Well, you're going to get from A to B a bit quicker. But for taxpayers, if suddenly you're getting a huge positive net revenue payback, and if the business case has been got right, and suddenly you're seeing your state coffers expand, not only because of the economic impact of the railroad, but also because of the line side development, property development that thereby ensues, I think suddenly the case becomes a lot easier. Time will tell.
All right. If it's okay, we have time for 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So, the question from Kyle. You mentioned Shikansen in Texas, but specifically on the Eastern Corridor, DC to Boston, would you see an upgrade to Shikansen technology or even superior technology in that corridor?
Well, we have very good trains on that corridor, the Acela, and just wait till you see the newer Acelas. The newer Acelas are just going to be game changers because obviously they're that much newer. They've got more capacity, so they're longer and they can run more quickly. They can do 160 miles per hour. And the impediment on the existing Northeast Corridor isn't the train, it's the infrastructure. Because remember those characteristics I talked about: no sharp turns, fairly straightforward topography, and generally not interlining. Well, you look at the Northeast Corridor, you are actually working in high-speed trains, the Acela, in with Northeast Regionals, in with other services that run over those tracks. Plus, you've got very old infrastructure such as the Baltimore Potomac Tunnel, very tight turns in some cases. Catenary that's been there a long time. It's safe, but it's not as reliable as it needs to be, particularly in very hot weather. And track needs to be upgraded. So what are we doing about it? Well, a massive program actually over a number of years. 1, bring in new trains. 2, actually bypass the B&P tunnel. 3, the new Susquehanna, I always get that word wrong, Susquehanna bridge. 4, straighten the track in some cases. 5, upgrade catenary and various other bits of infrastructure. And we believe that we can actually speed up the overall journey time from Boston to DC quite substantially, and then really utilize those beautiful newer Acelas, which you can actually see a number of them parked up at Philly while we do the testing. So it's a bit of a different line. It's not, you can't say that it's a pure high-speed line, but it's capable of those high speeds particularly on the straight sections, you will be getting up to 160.
I wanted to ask a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
So in addition to the Northeast Corridor having outdated infrastructure, it also faces a lot of schedule bottlenecking. Is there any plan to implement something like your speed team from New York to increase train speeds and tighten schedules and sort of improve general reliability?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not my specific responsibility right now, so I can't say I know all the details. But what I do know is my colleagues are looking at every aspect of ways to safely speed up that route. And certainly, wherever I've given advice, I'd say do look at things like we did in New York with save seconds, redundant speed restrictions, wrongly calibrated signal timers. I mean, slightly different technology, obviously, on the NEC as opposed to the subway. Making sure you get your operational disciplines right. And that, by the way, is one of the things that's so impressive about Shinkansen. It's not just the technology, it's not just the equipment, it's the operational discipline that goes with running that service. Really people who understand their jobs and who obsess about getting the detail right. So yeah, we are looking at all aspects of ways to improve the NEC. It's the busiest corridor in the US. In fact, North America, it's absolutely critical to our future.
All right. Thanks, Alex. And thank you again, Andy. So a question from Johnny, and hold on, I just lost my. As students, employees, voters, and citizens, what can we do to help support high-speed rail in this country and change our day-to-day's lives? I should mention this comes from, we have a close association with the High-Speed Rail Alliance out of Chicago.
Sure.
And several of our members here are the young professionals. So, but going back to the question.
I think in some ways the most value-adding thing you could do is, one, go out and preach the sort of high-speed good news that where you have actually studied this thing and where you've had the opportunity to ride it. Go to forums, tell people what the actual facts of the matter are, not the sort of urban myths. But two, most importantly, you're all voters. Get in touch with your elected officials, your city councillors, your mayor, your governor, your congress member, your senator, and ask them, do they support high-speed rail? Just a straight out question, yes or no, because then it's a binary question. You can't really wriggle out of that one. And if they say no, then obviously you can follow up and ask, well, why is that? If enough people were clamoring for high-speed rail, that's when politicians begin to consider maybe looking into something a bit more in more detail or potentially changing their position.
All right. Well, thank you again, Andy. I want to observe your time, but one last question here.
Sure.
Have you ever had the chance to visit Madison and have a cheese curd or a spotted cow?
No, I have an ambition to go to every US state, and I don't mean land at an airport and change planes. That doesn't count. It's got to be a proper visit, and I have yet to go to Wisconsin. And included on my shopping list are Milwaukee, because I like beer, and so this is the brewing capital, right? And I'm interested in it anyway. Very historic city. I happen to know someone who lives in Madison, and so I would one day love to come up and experience your beautiful state. And I have heard about the legendary dairy products, so I'm on my way.
All right. Well, you now have at least about 20 to 25 friends here in Madison.
Fabulous. That sounds good. One day we'll make it a reality. And hopefully one day we'll also be cutting the ribbon on a high-speed service for you. There you go.
Oh, just don't ask where to put the station. That will be a two-week conversation. But
sure.
Andy, on behalf of the whole group, thank you for your time. It's been a true pleasure meeting with you. We hope to continue the relationship and the conversation. So thank you so much. Isaac, thank you for putting this together. Any closing thoughts, Isaac, or even Noah?
None for me. Appreciate everyone's time. Thank you all for joining in Madison. It's great to see y'all's faces, and Andy, I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Take care, everyone.
All right. Have a good night. Take care.
See ya. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.